It's McCowan and Shannon back with you, and we're joined by our friend Richard Deitsch. Um, we haven't spent very little time really talking about Damar Hamlin's incident the other night from a variety of perspectives. The first piece of news I guess we should pass along to people who are not aware is that there was some indication that he showed some improvement overnight last night. But there's no real indication. He's still in a coma. I assume medically induced, but I don't know for sure. And the information that we are getting is it's very few. It's few and far between. They've been very quiet about his condition. That he is still listed in critical condition. I assume you don't know anything beyond that at all, Deitch?
No, I mean, what I know is what you've read. Obviously, we have at the Athletic, we have, man, it feels like 50 people who are part of the news team, including obviously Bengals reporters and people based in Cincinnati. And that seems to be the latest that, he's still in critical condition as we're taping this. But the family, from what they released, does seem to indicate that the news is than better today than in the last couple of days. Like there seems to be signs of like increased oxygen and things like that. But you guys both know this. If you're in critical condition in an ICU, it's still very, very serious. So if you're a person who believes in prayer, this is a guy I think who still needs it.
Yeah, and the longer he is in critical condition, the more critical, for lack of a better term, I think he is. Don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think just as a layperson, you'd like to get some good news over the next couple of days. I mean, I don't know if this is naive or not, but the one thing I do sort of hold on to is he's 24 years old. He's a professional athlete. Mm-hmm. He's in sort of the 99th percentile of human beings in terms of condition. So my hope is that helps with recovery. And then nobody knows this, but I imagine the medical people who worked on him probably have a real sense of what the situation is and how quickly they were able to get his heart to start again. But yeah, I mean, I would say, Bob, the longer that we hear the family sort of release information that at least is positive, that's a good sign. Like, I think when things seem dire, people sort of don't talk. And the fact that there are family people talking, I take that as a good sign, a positive sign.
One of the reasons you're on here today, Richard, is you're one of the preeminent media writers and critics, if you want to put it that way. And we wanted to talk about how it was covered on Monday and what you thought of the reaction of not just ESPN, but if possible, multiple networks on how news of this ilk is covered in a world that doesn't normally cover these types of things.
Yeah, John, it's the old joke, by the way, in terms of being a preeminent media writer, that and 275 will get you on the New York City subway these days. So let me just give my...
Well, everybody's a media expert because they got a television in their family room. So
yeah, or a Zoom, or a podcast or a Zoom meeting.
Hold on, podcasts different. Podcasts are different.
So, yeah, I mean, I'll focus obviously a lot on ESPN because to start with, just because they had the game. And so everything sort of was filtered through them on that initial day. And I thought they did, honestly, an extraordinary job. There are people who do what I do who have not praised them as highly as I have. And it's all a subjective thing. But, the way I look at it is this has never happened before. Essentially unprecedented situation. Player goes down. Player potentially maybe dying on the field. Yeah, I know it happened in 1971, but that's essentially a different lifetime. We live in a different world now. And so the thing I appreciated first about the broadcast was that you never saw Joe Buck and Troy Aikman like speculate. Their words were sparse. They sort of said very little, and I think that was smart. You don't want to say anything that you end up being totally wrong and that you can't take back. I thought the production, like the director and the producer, made really smart decisions. If you remember, if you watch Monday Night Football, not a ton of close-ups. They shot the field wide, so it's not like you put a big close-up on the ambulance or something like that. I thought they were respectful of the moment. They only showed 2 replays. And again, news people can argue how many you should show, how many you shouldn't. I thought that was a pretty thoughtful move as well, that you showed the replay, but you didn't show it over and over and over again, which I will point out, John, because you want to mention, that is something the cable networks in the U.S. did. CNN repeatedly showed it. Others do. It's just a different way to look at news, obviously. Then ESPN has to go to the studio. So they have Susie Colbert, Booger McFarland, Adam Schefter. And again, this is an unprecedented situation. You're in New York, the game's in Cincinnati. Those guys have no idea what's going on. They're basically they're reading Twitter and the web just like we are. So you got to do all that stuff on live TV. I thought Booger McFarland was really, really good. He just used his experience as a former player, particularly a defensive lineman. All those guys are in combat on every play, and was very quick. He might have been the first prominent person to say, like, this game's got to stop. Like, you can't return to the field and expect these guys to play. And then again, I thought that ESPN was smart. They went back to Troy Aikman and Joe Buck and Lisa Salters, but they didn't sort of stay there for an hour. They then went back to the studio. And then eventually, I don't know how many Canadians saw this. It was on TSN. You know, Scott Van Pelt, who's a prominent ESPN SportsCenter anchor, he had Ryan Clark on. He had Lisa Salters on. And they had really thoughtful conversations, just like beyond like the play itself, on like what, you know, what is this sport? Like, what's the sport, and like what the responsibilities are of these players, and how should we think about violence? And you make this covenant, if you're a player, like every day in many ways, to like not think about the possibility of, you know, seriously getting injured or dying on the field. So I thought ESPN honestly did really, really well. I thought they handled the situation, which had never been, essentially, again, an unprecedented situation, really smartly, professionally, with humanity. From what I saw, the cable networks, John, I got to be honest with you, I'm so down on U.S. cable that I see everything through that prism. And the prism that I see it through is just essentially, if it's not conflict television, it's just television to like blare at you. It's so, I mean, I know a lot of Canadians don't want me to say this because I flag wave on this, but you're so fortunate to have the CBC, which really does a lot of like explaining and like education. And it gives people who we normally don't hear on air, like, voice. U.S. cable television, essentially, at this point, to me, it's like an entertainment medium. It just wants to keep you watching, keep you entertained, keep you eating chicken wings. You know what I mean? Until the next segment. I hate to be cynical, but that's sort of how I see it.